Hi, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm, and this video might be of special interest to those of you who are trying out the plant business idea in your head and want to see what that translates into when you're turning that into a side hustle, a farm business like I'm doing here, or like Shelly is doing at Kawartha Family Farm. I had a chance to sit down with her on a Zoom call and compare some notes about how we're turning our plant business into something that is sustainable and that we can work on full time. Well,
Okay.
thanks so much for joining me, Shelly. I really appreciate you taking the time today.
Yeah, great. I'm happy to be here.
So why don't you tell me just a little bit about Kawartha Family Farm? I have the website open here. I might be browsing as we talk here, but what strikes me is that we're both approaching a similar problem here of how to take our small plant business. I'm going to say both of us are small at this point,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
turn it into something that we can do more full time.
yeah,
So tell me a little bit about where you're doing that and what you're doing.
yeah. So we're about an hour and a half northeast of Toronto. We moved here in 2020 and started planting in 21. So really just zoning in on perennials, and kind of the vision is to kind of create an experience where people can get comfortable with perennials. Perennials are tough because you go to a nursery, you see green and you see a tag, and it's just really difficult to understand what you're buying. So trying to bring perennials to life a little bit on the farm, so creating gardens that they can view, um, all sorts of mature plants as well as the young ones, just helping to create a perennial learning experience, if you will.
Well, that's great. There was a local nursery here that followed a similar template called Free Spirit Nursery. They've since closed down. They did lots of specialty plants, but the big kick there was that they would have them planted in the landscape so you could see what the plants actually
Right,
do as mature. And then they
yeah,
would also have them in pots. And so that's
right,
something similar to what you're doing.
yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah,
Perfect.
we also dig them as well. So this is something that came up last year. People love it. Um, we have a dig garden where they can see it in context. They can see the plant growing, and then we just literally dig it up. They put it in a bag, and I tell them you have to plant this when you get home. You got to water the whole well, water it well, and it's just like transplanting, but it's in the customer's garden. So
Yeah, I noticed that on your website. It's really kind of
hmm,
neat. I mean, two points on that. One thing I noticed you do a lot with fabric pots. So I'll let you comment on that. But the other thing is
yeah,
that experience of having customers come in and dig their own perennials or have you
yeah,
dig with them. That sort of interactive. That makes it an experience more so than
yeah,
just a retail thing, which I'm coming around to a lot myself here on the farm. Is that idea that if we try to be just like the other garden centers, well, people know what that looks like, right?
yeah,
But
yeah,
if they're going to come to a slightly more remote location like mine, further away from the urban centers, it's nice to turn it into something that's more of an experience.
right, exactly. And people love it. And the difference, I could sell the very same plant in a pot versus dug, and it's a different interaction and a different experience.
That's
So
great. And those fabric bags?
yeah, the fabric bags, I did a lot of research and I landed on these root pouch bags. They've been great. I know they don't work like all the commercial systems are built around the plastic pot. So we have more flexibility as small farmers. And they don't become root bound. And it's amazing. I had a customer come just last week and say, your bleeding heart shouldn't be thriving right now in pots. And I said, yeah, it's these fabric pots. I can overwinter plants in them, but you should never be able to overwinter and survive just because they breathe.
Oh,
So
that's great.
it's nice. Yeah,
And it's like having them in their own shopping bag right away.
exactly. And so people say, oh, I'll return the bags because I won't repot. And I said, you'll be amazed at the uses you'll find for those fabric bags. Um, so yeah, I've had a really good experience with them.
So can you tell me a little bit? Let's talk a little bit about pricing and jump right into things here.
Yeah,
We're talking obviously Canadian pricing here.
yeah,
You have 1 gallon perennials potted plants at about $11, and you have
yeah,
3 to 5 gallon larger pots at about $15. I would say that's generally fairly competitive, and of course everything's going to change by
yeah,
different markets. So just for the viewers watching this, of course, don't compare that to your local pricing. But I
yeah,
would say for the Canadian market, what you have is fairly competitive.
yeah. That's what I'm trying to do. Trying to keep prices down by growing as much as we can here. Um, as you know, like a nursery will ship, they'll ship their product in retail ready. There's a lot of costs involved in that. So if I can keep things contained by growing it here, I control the costs, right? So I don't get those fluctuations as fuel goes crazy.
Well, sure. I mean,
and then the digging.
if you were buying retail ready, if you went to a wholesaler and you
Yeah.
were trying to buy a pretty interesting 1 gallon perennial, it might cost you from $9 to $15 right there. Growing it yourself, if you're doing it from divisions, doing it from seed, you can cut down those costs an awful lot. And
Right.
I don't know that we necessarily need to be in the sharp pricing game, like being super competitive, but it feels like a fair deal between us and the customer. That is,
Right.
that if we're going to be able to grow it at low cost and offer it as a low cost operator, and they're going to take all the trouble to come out and see us, then we want that to be kind of a good experience for them too, and have some of that extra value, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's where the field dig comes in as well. Obviously, that's lower cost. I have lower labor costs because we're not potting up. We don't have the bag and the soil costs. So I pass those savings on. So for the field digging, it's lower cost as well.
So you might be asking, just look at one more detail from your website, and you say you're open daily, and I have not been able to manage that at all. We sell online. We allow people to come up to the farm here and pick up their orders on Saturdays. We're open Fridays and Saturdays for people to come and browse and shop, but open daily is not something that. So what's your strategy behind that, or is that has it been difficult for you? Does it work well for you? I'm just looking for feedback.
Yeah, no, we last year we were closed a few days, and we did open daily because well, I benefit from having four children, and so it truly is a family farm. So my son and daughter are out there every day, weeding and doing jobs. So it's no, so if a customer comes in, we're there. So we decided to open daily just to, we're trying to build our audience as well, right? So, our customers were very new. So there's a certain group of people that really like to come early in the week because they want to spend the week getting their planting done, and they don't want to necessarily spend their weekend doing it. So,
gotcha. Yeah, and I think we've weighed the pros and cons a little bit, and we obviously have lots of other things to do on the farm too, and I have YouTube to take care of, so I have to have a day of the week for that, and lots of things that happen, family and so on. So we've tried to segregate the business into Fridays and Saturdays, and that way, if I want to go to a farmer's market on Sunday, I can go and do that. And it is a different game because I don't have the kids involved in the business. They could care less, I have to say. But that narrowing it down to Fridays and Saturdays, we've struggled with whether that makes, whether we need to open more, open less. So it's good to hear your point of view on that. Part of my experience has been that if we compress the week, they'll show up when we tell them to, and you'll just get more business in a lower amount of time, and that frees up more of our time for other projects. But I can also see your point about if you're there anyway, you're doing work, you're on the farm, then you may as well be able to greet somebody if they drive by or show up, right?
Yeah. So
cool. So where do you source your plants? What is your mix like that way?
Yeah, so this is kind of a bit of a fork in the road for me because I'm not an expert. I don't have the background that you have. I kind of had the vision and just started planting. And so I started with plugs, like wholesale plugs. And that's how we've kind of built so many gardens so quickly. But I kind of want to move away from that. It's very easy to do, the little plugs, but I also want to shift more to propagation, seeding. So I did do like probably 25% seeding starting last winter. And now I want to move into more seeding. I really want to get into propagation, but let me tell you, I have not yet been successful. I watch your videos, I watch Jim Putnam's videos, I watch all sorts of videos, and I just can't get it right. But I am trying to really grow right from seed to, right from the very beginning, but I will have to supplement with plugs.
Sure. And even as I was a long time perennial grower, I spent many years in the business. And I have to say, buying in plugs from other suppliers is not a bad idea. It's actually a
Yeah,
great way to get a jump start into the business. You can't
yeah,
be all things to all plants, right? So
right,
as good as you
right.
can be, some things are great to start from seed. A great business case for starting digitalis or foxglove from seed. You can pretty
Right.
much start it in February from a tiny little grain of sand and probably
Yeah.
end up with a saleable plant by June. I mean, that's amazing, right? So
Yeah.
there's lots of that make a good case that way. Other plants, you can't either get the assortment that you want just by seed. You have to get from licensed suppliers like newer varieties and so on. So for some of the more interesting varieties, but also just again from a time saving point of view, because you are splitting your time between doing this and the day job, which I did for many years as well.
Yeah.
Granted, my day job was already growing perennials, but
Right.
I know what it's like in terms of trying to just split your efforts all that way. So you're already propagating doing division, which is great. You're already
Yeah.
so you're supplying some of your plants that way, but you're also doing the plugs, the seeds. I'd say keep a healthy mix. I think the one that I am this year we probably did about a 50-50 split between growing our own perennials and buying in our own perennials. And when we bought
Right.
in our own perennials, I really tried to stick to those items that were either only available by bare root from one of our suppliers, Van Noort,
Yeah.
or available from only as a finished product. I only really did that if it was something that I just couldn't get anywhere else, and I really wanted it for interest for
Right.
customers coming in. And it's just like there's no way you're going to find this any other way than retail ready.
Right. Yeah. No. And I think most of my suppliers I actually learned from you. It's it's great being Canadian, and it's great that you're Canadian because we just have different challenges and a different set of options than the Americans, for example. So I do get my seeds from Gelato, fantastic variety. So that's amazing because then we can offer things, Um, and then I also get my bare roots from Van Noort.
Yeah, and when I talk about seed suppliers, a couple other suppliers I've looked at or have worked with a little bit, and they're in the U.S. One is called Hazards, and the other one is called Geo Seeds. And sometimes they'll have the very same varieties as Gelato, but they have a wider assortment, and some of those are ones that Gelato doesn't carry. So, and
All
here in
right.
Canada, we also have William Dam Seeds, which is
Yeah.
I've used a little bit, but hazards and geoseeds have a much larger assortment.
All right. I haven't heard of those. I have ordered from Johnny's in the US. So yeah,
Yeah,
it's interesting to find, the best places to order and um, try to make that Canadian dollar go as far as we can.
so one thing I will say is that from a perspective of what you've chosen perennials, I think it's a great business. I do roses. I specialize in roses,
Right.
but spent many years as a perennial grower, and I have to say, getting a perennial ready for sale to the expectations of the customers and having more interesting perennials, you can do that much easier than trying to get a rose. I mean, the growth cycle on a rose is a long time, and meeting customer expectations. I mean, even after growing a rose for a year and putting it out, people are still saying, well, that's small. But what they're
Right.
accustomed to in their head is they're accustomed to those big bare root roses from the US. But
Yeah.
perennials, you can grow a great perennial within a season or maybe a season and a half.
Yeah.
And the other thing about perennials is that your knowledge really plays in there. You'll have a better assortment than anybody else in the market just by doing a little bit of homework yourself. I mean, perennials are that broad and that wide that you can become a specialist so quickly and
Right.
offer a little bit extra or interesting that way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's amazing to me. I would say 80% of the perennials I do sell are in season, in bloom. People still really, and I think that's why annuals are so popular because people like to see something that's in bloom. So I still really try to educate customers along the pendulum as well, right? To say this is going to be beautiful in 6 weeks, but I still do really like it in bloom. But and the benefit for me as well having the gardens is I don't have to sell off or get rid of inventory at the end of the season. I just plant it.
Right. So now I just wouldn't mind touching on that question of being an experience. We talked about that
Yeah.
earlier. I mean, really, I guess the direction I'm trying to push the business now is into something called agritourism, which most people
Right.
would get. Like
Exactly.
it's like, you're going up to the Kawarthas, that's
Yeah.
not directly in Toronto. You're probably, what, about 2.5 hours from Toronto?
90 minutes to 2 hours. Yeah.
Oh,
They
okay.
have a new
So
highway that kind
not as
of,
distant as I was thinking,
yeah,
but
far
in any
enough.
case, still far enough to add a
Yeah.
barrier. And same thing for us. If you wanted to come
Right.
from Vancouver to
Right.
Desroches, you're still an hour and a bit to get here.
Yeah.
So people who make the trek from Richmond or Vancouver to here, you want to make it worth their while, and you want to make it an experience. So we've done a few other things, like we've set up a picnic area where they can come and have a picnic. We've set up the display gardens where they can walk around and take pictures. We've been
Right.
offering tours and seminars, that kind of thing. And I've been keeping an eye on a few of our local, I'm going to say, examples of this. People like there's a place called a 5 Acre Flower Farm here in the Fraser Valley that does a lot of seminars on cut flowers and that kind of thing. There's another place called Lakeland Flowers. They run the Abbotsford Tulip Festival, and they're doing all sorts of things like bringing in music and doing big events on their farm. And
Yeah.
it's got my head spinning around, how can we make this more of an intentional event for our customers? I think that's really the way to go. Take that, the penny pinching, economizing out of it and turn it into an experience, because people
Yeah.
are far less worried about what they spend on an experience than they are if you're trying to say, well, I've got the best annual prices in town.
Right. Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. I agree. And my husband and I were just talking about that. I said, we're probably a year or two out of being in a position that it's, that I would even advertise for the Toronto market, right? Because once you get them here, you want them to be, know that it's worth the trip. We are lucky that we have lots of land. Um, it's dangerous too, but I've been thinking of things like turning the one field, which is 4 to 5 acres, just wildflower, and cutting out a labyrinth or pathways that people can come walk through the wildflower, like actual wildflowers, like just growing from. So things like that, yeah. But I absolutely I want it to draw people from a wider area. But like you said, it has to be about more than the plants, right?
Right. Yeah, it's got to be the whole experience. And to that degree, when people come here, it's not like we say exit through the gift shop, but we have a little gift shop
Yeah.
area set up that aren't
Yeah.
just the plants, but we have like greeting cards that say, the Fraser Valley Rose Farm logo on the back with the name of the rose and then a picture on the front. And that's been
Yeah.
quite nice. People want to buy one of those to say, hey, I was there and I enjoyed that. And they'll send that to a
Right.
friend. We'll do rose water, we'll do other things like that. Now, I have to say, I don't want to get into the business of making those things myself necessarily. I mean, we're busy enough in the off season that
Yeah.
that we're always working on presentation for the farm or even growing for next year. So I don't actually want to get into the business of creating rose crafts or jams or that kind of thing. But if there are some available on the market and I can test out that market and have people buy them when they're here, then I'll have a good idea of what people will buy when they're here.
Yeah.
And eventually what that will mean is maybe we do bring it in-house. But for now, I'd rather let other people be the experts on that and I can be the experts on growing plants.
Yeah. And that's the challenge there, right? It does seem tempting. There was a lavender farm outside of Toronto that had a whole lot of products. And I just thought, well, it's like two different businesses, really. One thing I had thought about was asking people locally if they're interested in using the products from our farm to create items for sale. Like potpourris or jam. Like, I don't know, pressed flowers is a big thing now, dried flowers. Like, there's all sorts of things. Roses would have a lot of, like you said, rose water. So it keeps connected to the farm and it's actually our products, but I'm not actually making them.
Right. And that makes sense to me. I mean, partnerships like that, anything that's a win-win. And again, that you don't have to build yourself, which is kind of
Right.
nice.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you a little bit about how you're balancing this. I mean, people are doing a lot of people are in the same boat as us. We've got the small side hustle, maybe a hobby farm, but how do you turn that into something that is more of a full-time thing? And I gather you're still working off the farm. just finally being able to cast that away after many years of trying to
Yeah.
balance both in
I
some
was
manner.
so
But
jealous.
it's not the easiest thing, right?
No, yeah. I remember watching your video when you were finally able to make the transition, and I thought, well, that's the goal, one day. But yeah, I do work from home, which is lucky. I do have to travel a little bit, but not a lot. Honestly, honestly, I wouldn't be able to do it without my family. My husband's out there. My brother, he does the mowing and landscaping. And like I said, when my two younger children are out from school in the summer, you know, university and college age, they chip in as well. So I just kind of have the plan and send the direction, and everybody goes off, and magical things happen while I'm working all day. And then, of course, I'm out there every night. Like during the growing season, you're just going like 80, 90 hours a week. Like there's no getting around it, right?
Yeah,
But
no,
it's a late,
it's true, and you put in as much time as you need. I guess the one thing I focused on before, I try to think back before the transition of
yeah,
doing this kind of full time, and what I really prioritized on was working on what I called the bones of the business. Just like you'd plant the bones of the garden first, you put in the
yeah,
trees, the shrubs, and then work on filling it in afterwards. And I felt like getting the social media end was really key. You know, getting
yeah,
onto Instagram, Facebook groups. I have a couple of big Facebook groups I promote on roses, doing the YouTube channel, and then obviously getting your stock plants, learning the growing, learning the suppliers, which you're already doing, right? So
yeah,
I guess I can't really give you tons of advice on that, except to say that that the key things are getting. I think you build your relationship in the community in advance of having anything really fantastic to show them, which is always a little bit tricky. You know, you're kind of,
yeah,
I don't want to call it fake it till you make it, but you can't wait until you're
right,
fully grown and you spring fully grown out of Zeus's head before you say,
yeah,
okay, here I
yeah,
am, I'm wonderful, come and see
yeah,
me, because by then you've put in so much effort and you can't really roll that into the business. So I think that's probably the way to go.
yeah. And then you get these great customers that are along on the journey with you, and they're really
Mm-hmm.
excited to see the progress, and they share the excitement. Yeah. Most people that come here, because we are rural, like we are kind of rural, it'd be hard to find us. We don't have a lot of signage and stuff, come from Instagram and Facebook for sure.
Right
And
on.
then I am not a professional in this field, so I also have to get up every morning and go to bed every night, every single day, watching YouTube videos and learning. Um, you know, see some mistakes, go find, you know, the solution. But one of the challenges I found is that for every bit of advice, there's a piece of opposite of advice. So sometimes trying to reconcile it all and go, what the heck? So I'm at a great place now where I've got my small set of people that I follow that I've just kind of learned to trust and go, okay, yeah, I align with that person. You're one of them, obviously. Where I just kind of have my, you know, my subscription base, always go in, see what they've published.
Well, it's
Um,
a good point. Just because we're on the internet doesn't mean we're actually right, or maybe not right for your situation, because it can be a
right,
different thing. Well, I
right.
really appreciate you taking the time with me today. I know you're running up against a deadline that you have to
Yeah,
get off this
yeah,
call, but I once again just thank you so much. I think that viewers may find this kind of conversation between two people trying to solve the same problem to be kind
right.
of useful in their own thing. And for those viewers, feel free to drop comments into the bottom of the video, and I'll see what I can do to help.
Great. Thanks so much. It was a great chatting with you.
My pleasure.